Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile 1 discussion. We're now really solidly into teaser season for the upcoming, what I'm calling patch 3.25.5, which is the upcoming Legacy of Phrecia event. In this event, the normal 19 Ascendancy classes are being totally replaced by 19 others. These will be things that have been designed and scrapped. There'll be things that were designed for PathOfExile 2, or there'll be a bunch of other things that grinding gear games have come up with. A lot of the time, these involve mechanics that are already in the game, but you're able to get them all on one particular setup. There are two new Ascendancies that have been revealed today. The Shadow is picking up the Servant of Arakaali, but it is the Architect of Chaos on the Templar we're going to be talking about today. The Templar's Architect of Chaos answers a question for you. What would it feel like to have the religious zeal of the Templar, but not the faith in Oriath's religion, the religion of Innocence? Instead, you're going to have that faith in the Vaal's religion, dedication to sacrifice and to chaos. That is what this Ascendancy is going to be looking at. There's a number of things that are going on in this. There's a whole bunch of interactions with Vaal skills. Now, Vaal skills are something that's a PathOfExile 1 only thing at the moment. If you're a PathOfExile 2 player, then this is something I kind of hope comes to that game at some point. But in PathOfExile 1, it's much more of an opportunity cost to set up a heavily linked skill than it is in PathOfExile 2. In PathOfExile 1, you can only really have 1 or 2 6 links on a character, depending upon the way that your character is set up and what sacrifices you're willing to pay. Because of that, you generally speaking want to have an all-around skill that does most of the work for you, and then a couple of 4-link skills, and potentially a bunch of unlinked utility. Enter Vaal skills. Vaal skills upgrade a normal skill into something more akin to PathOfExile 2's Comet. They have an intrinsically long cooldown-like effect, but it's not a cooldown that recovers over time, although part of it recovers over time, but the main way that it recovers is by you killing monsters. Vaal skills are a very powerful effect because you get both the normal version and the Vaal version on the same character at the same time for the same gem slots, especially if your Vaal version of the skill wants to use the same support gems as the non-Vaal version. There's a bit of an example here of something that can give you a flavor of what these things do. Blade Vortex is a skill in PathOfExile 1 that causes blades to spin around your character, basically turning you into a portable mincer. You run around up to enemies, and those blades hit them and do a bunch of damage to them. Blade Vortex is something that you can recast, and you can actually stack it up to 10 charges. Then you can run into a pack of monsters and watch them all fall over dead. Vaal Blade Vortex is a version of Blade Vortex where it operates independently from you, and it's always at the maximum 10 charges. So it just roams around the screen. It stays on the same screen as you, but it just runs around killing monsters for you, while you can still also use the normal Blade Vortex as well. These are very, very strong. There's a whole bunch of the Ascendancy dedicated to them. I'm going to cover those nodes last though. I'm going to look at everything else first. It's important to note also that Forbidden Secrets is something that is very heavily tied to this Vaal skill mechanic as well. So it's not just Fever for Corruption, Chaos Reigns, and Depose Order, which outright say that they're tied to the Vaal skills, but it is also Forbidden Secrets as well. Now, because there are so many of these nodes that are tied to Vaal skills, if you're not interested in building around Vaal skills, you're not going to find that much in this Ascendancy. There's Dissolution, Impure Blood, Hewn Flesh, and also Glimpse Chaos, which are all things that do not require Vaal skills. The thing is that it's kind of unlikely you want all 4 of these on the same build, and that's the reason that I think you definitely need to be a Vaal skill spec of some description in order to get much out of this. Let's talk about Dissolution first. Those of you that are familiar with PathOfExile 1's endgame uniques will recognize this jewel, Dissolution of the Flesh. Dissolution of the Flesh is one of the boss uniques that was added in patch 3.17. It's a jewel, and it removes all your energy shield, and it changes the way that life works on a fundamental level, and it also grants you a bonus to your maximum life. Now, this is a multiplicative bonus for maximum life, and a 30% one is potentially very, very good indeed. However, Dissolution works a little bit differently. The key difference is that the 2 seconds mentioned on Dissolution of the Flesh is buffed to 1 second when it comes to the Architect of Chaos's Dissolution node. Dissolution removes all energy shield. Ouch. Life that would be lost by taking damage is instead reserved until you take no damage to life for 1 second. What this does is it essentially causes damage to reduce your maximum hit points instead of your current hit points, but for this decrease in maximum hit points to completely and utterly go away the instant you go 1 second without taking damage. This is really bad in environments where you're taking chip damage from a lot of different sources, and it is really good in environments where you are taking major hits every now and again. Especially against super slow hitting bosses like the Guardian of the Minotaur, this is an incredibly strong defensive setup there. Essentially, with the Guardian of the Minotaur, if you're not one-shot by something, then you're in very, very little danger in that fight because of Dissolution. The boss just simply can't hit you more than about once every 1.75 seconds. So if you don't get one shot, then 1 second later, you're going to be back at full life. Or at least, not technically full life, but at full effective life, because your life will be unreserved again, and damage will be not going to your life pool, but to your maximum life pool instead. Now, there's a couple of shenanigans you can pull with this, and the most important thing to keep in mind with this is it decouples your present life from your capacity to survive. For example, if you had a skill that says sacrifice 1000 life in order to empower some particular effect, and you can build this yourself using sacrifice support in PathOfExile 1, then sacrificing 1000 life ordinarily brings you 1000 health closer to death. However, when combined with Dissolution, or for that matter, Dissolution of the Flesh, then that 1000 life loss is not going to bring you 1000 points closer to death. Instead, it's just going to bring you 1000 life points closer to not being able to pay to use that ability again. Because ultimately, it is only damage that is modified by Dissolution. This does not change effects that cause life loss instead. That's Dissolution. Do I recommend taking this while you are leveling? I think the answer is no. I'd be willing to try it, but I feel like the fact that when you're leveling, there's just a lot of small hits. You're taking 20 damage from this monster that's firing off a needle at you. You're taking 160 from that white monster's melee attack. You're taking 175 or 220 from that monster's lightning totems. All these little things that add up end up being the main danger. And going a full second without taking any damage might not happen in the periods that you're likely to be in danger of dying. So Dissolution may not build up any additional tankiness while you're running through the campaign. And of course, Chaos Reigns, we'll get to that in a sec, it's going to be phenomenal when you're leveling. I also feel something people may not realize with Dissolution is just how bad it's going to be to suffer from a bleed or an ignite or a poison while you're under the impact of Dissolution as an Ascendancy node, because this is going to mean that you're not going to be able to regain any health until that damaging affliction is cleared or until that damaging affliction has timed out. For example, if you've got 1700 life in the campaign, you take a 1000 point hit and it inflicts a bleed on you, then you're going to go to 700 health as your maximum, and then you're just going to be reserving life because of that bleed until you're able to clear that bleed. And then even once you do clear that bleed, it's still a full second until it's completely gone and you're back to 1700 effective life again. So if you are going to use Dissolution, you are going to need to find a solution to all of the damaging ailments and the damage over time effects in general. Okay, so let's take a look at the southeast corner of this Ascendancy. We have Impure Blood leading to Hewn Flesh. Hewn Flesh is ultra niche. I can think of a couple of use cases for it, but the vast majority of players will immediately become weaker if they allocate this, and they're going to be looking for regret orbs in order to unspec them. Or if we get the Settlers mechanics, which I don't know that we will, you might be able to do it with gold. Whatever the case, Hewn Flesh, don't take this unless you know exactly what you're doing and exactly why you're taking it. Impure Blood though, this is phenomenal. In PathOfExile 1, solving mana recovery can be tricky on builds. Impure Blood simply solves it for you. You already want to have life recovery on your build, you might have some form of leech, and Impure Blood is just going to make sure you can always cast your skills. But on top of this, it also allows you to reserve 100% of your mana to pay for effects like the Aura Anger, the Aura Wrath, the Aura Determination, various Herald effects like Herald of Ice, Herald of Ash, all sorts of other mechanics that you might want to use on your build that reserve mana. I want to mention two scenarios that Impure Blood will really completely bail you out of. The first one, you reserved 100% of your mana to cast various auras, and then you want to use your skills and you don't have enough maximum mana. Impure Blood completely bails you out. Now that's something that's reasonably obvious, but what about a scenario where you reserve only 96% of your mana, and then you've still got enough to use your Lightning Strike skill twice, but then you're out of mana after that. But you've got so much gain on hit that everything seems like it's fine. Okay, So you're able to use your skills when everything goes right. But then the boss teleports out of the way when you're striking it, and you fire off 2 lightning strikes at the spot that it was in, and they end up both missing the boss. Then you find out yourself out of mana, and also your primary way of regaining mana has been turned off. What's Impure Blood do here? It completely bails you out, because chances are you've still got plenty of life that you can use in order to pay for that skill instead. So that's Impure Blood for you. It will save a lot of support gem slots because a lot of builds use life tap in several different spots, and it's also just extremely, extremely good all around. The other thing that I have in mind for this is mines in particular. Mines, they cost a bunch of mana and they also reserve a bunch of mana. What can happen with mines is that they can be really, really difficult to pay the mana cost of, because you might have, say, 550 unreserved mana, you then throw down a bunch of mines, you reserve 270 mana and you spend 270 mana, then you start a detonation chain. At this point, you're now at 10 of 550 again. Then you want to throw more mines after the detonation chain starts, but you've already got to tap your mana flask in order to be able to pay for the cost. You can pay for the reservation just fine, but you can't pay for the new cost. And that can be really difficult to manage on a mine build. Impure Blood will solve that problem for you. They will still reserve mana, but you don't really care about them reserving mana, and that's where I think this is going to shine the brightest. This then leads to Hewn Flesh. Now this has the text, skills reserve life instead of mana, and 100% increased life preservation efficiency of skills. Now, life preservation efficiency is a harder stat to get than mana reservation efficiency. The reason I don't like this in general builds, usually the times that you want to reserve life instead of mana, it's because you've already reserved all of the mana that you can reserve on your character, and now you're in a situation where you either don't have any remaining unreserved mana, or at least not enough to pay for another aura that you want, or alternately, maybe you do have enough to pay for it, but if you do pay for it, then you'll end up in a situation where you can't cast your skills. Then, and only then, do you start reserving skills against life. That's the normal way that you would run it. However, Hewn Flesh removes your agency to reserve mana entirely. That means the only scenario in which I really want to play this is if I'm playing some sort of mana stacking build. That's probably an Archmage setup. It's probably one that's using Mind Over Matter. That's the sort of way that you might get around all of the drawbacks that are associated with Hewn Flesh. If you're playing a build like that, then yes, definitely take this. It's going to be really strong. It's going to mean that all of your mana is available for casting your Archmage skills, but of course, they're going to cost life instead of mana, which is something that could be fairly mean to get around. Your actual mana that you've got, your actual mana pool, can be used to pay for the sacrifice cost on Arcane Cloak, and can also be used as a way of defending your life through the use of Mind Over Matter. So that's my thoughts on Hewn Flesh. Do not take this unless you know exactly what you're doing. It'll make your character weaker, but if you do know exactly what you're doing, you will find some corner cases where you do want this. Next, we have the last 2-pointer that is not associated with Vaal skills, and that is Due North Glimpse Chaos. Glimpse Chaos, some of you might recognize this stat from the unique chess piece Shadow Stitch. Shadow Stitch is something that I quite like in PathOfExile 1, but it is not something that sees massively widespread use, mostly because the chest slot is just so competitive. Glimpse Chaos has a text gain 8% increased maximum life and 12% increased maximum energy shield for each corrupted item that you have equipped. A quick important side note here, flasks do not count as equipped, jewels do not count as equipped. I believe that being equipped is identically equal to the set of things that you can use an incubator on. There is, however, a drawback to Glimpse Chaos, and that is -4 to all resistances. Note that that's all resistances, not just elemental resistances, for each corrupted item equipped. So, if you can overcap your resistances by quite a lot, maybe you're Chaos Inoculation, in which case you just don't care about the -4 Chaos resistance, or maybe you've just got a lot of Chaos resistance on gear, and you're fine anyway, then Glimpse Chaos is going to massively increase your overall hit point pool, both your life and your energy shield if you are hybrid, and if you're only using one of them, well, it's going to increase that one a lot. There's a lot of power here, but you do need to jump through the hoops of dealing with those resist nerfs that come with it, and they are not insignificant, but they're not overwhelming. Additionally, something I'll add is that corrupting items in PathOfExile 1 is a little bit riskier than it is in PathOfExile 2. There's just more ways that it can go very, very tragically wrong, which can be hilarious. As I always say, may your Vaal orbs have interesting results. Not necessarily good ones, interesting ones. Next, you have everything that is tied to Vaal skills. Now, we've already mentioned quickly that Vaal skills are special versions, corrupted versions of skill gems that have an additional skill. They grant you 2 skills instead of 1. For instance, you get both Fireball and Vaal Fireball at the same time, and those Vaal skill gems cannot be further modified. So for instance, if your Fireball doesn't have quality on it, and you apply a Vaal Orb to it and it becomes Vaal Fireball, then your Vaal Fireball is never going to get quality on it. Now, there are 2 mechanics that throttle how frequently you can use Vaal skills. The first one of these is Soul Gain Prevention. The second one is Soul Cost. Let's start with the Soul Cost. When you cast a Vaal skill, you need to sacrifice a certain number of souls that you've collected by killing monsters throughout the zone. Those of you familiar with PathOfExile 2, you can think of this as just being similar to the way that your charms recharge. So you might expend 24 to use it once, then you kill monsters and you rebuild that 24 over time. Additionally, applying damage to bosses will gain you Vaal souls even from damage that doesn't outright kill them. There's a couple of mechanics around that. So having 50% reduced Vaal souls per use simply means that you can use them twice as often. There is, however, another important mechanic, and that is Soul Gain Prevention. After you use a Vaal skill, the intention is that that use of the Vaal skill does not help recover the souls that were expended to cast it. So if you cast a Vaal skill, you cannot harvest any Vaal souls for a short period. This is longer if the Vaal skill gem has a duration on it, and it also scales with any effects that increase the duration of that Vaal skill. For example, if you were to use Vaal Blade Vortex, which we mentioned earlier, that has a duration on it. So if you were to increase the duration by 40%, that would also increase the Soul Gain Prevention duration by 40%. During that period, it's not going to gain any further charges towards its next use. The intention is that these are big cooldown skills that you use when you feel you're in a little bit of trouble, and then you can regain those souls and use them again the next time that you really need them. However, this is PathOfExile 1. People find plenty of ways to get around that limitation. Now, Depose Order is something that is just extremely good. 286% increased Vaal skill critical strike chance means that when you fire off your Vaal skill, not only is it already better than a normal use of the skill, but it is also going to crit a lot. A lot. Even if you're not crit spec'd, this is going to get you over the line into critical hits quite frequently, but this is going to really pull you in a critical strike direction, and that's something you're going to want to consider when you're thinking about how you want to build this. Good example you could use here is Vaal Lightning Strike. You might not be crit capped on the Lightning Strike aspect, but the Vaal Lightning Strike, that's probably going to crit a lot. Fever for Corruption is on the other side, 50% increased Vaal skill effect duration, and also the 50% reduced souls per use. This is just made for Vaal Lightning Strike. Vaal Lightning Strike is phenomenal. This is going to make it even better. It doesn't need to be better. It probably actually needs to be nerfed. This is going to push it right up into the stratosphere. I think we will see a number of Templars experimenting with Vaal Lightning Strike in patch 3.25.5. And then we also have Forbidden Secrets, which also is going to deal with Vaal skills, although in a less obvious way. So let's start with the Everlasting Sacrifice component of this item. Everlasting Sacrifice is weird. It's a very strong defensive mechanic if you have a very small but non-zero amount of energy shield on your character. Because of the requirement for it not to be zero, it's not going to work in conjunction with Dissolution, so don't bother trying that. With Everlasting Sacrifice though, whenever you reach full energy shield, all of your energy shield is taken away from you. It's converted, if you like, into a buff that lasts for 4 seconds and provides you with 5% to all maximum resistances. Note this is all 4 of them. This includes Chaos as well. And it's quite a powerful little buff that you get there, but it's one that you want to have a really high degree of uptime on. What's the best way to get high uptime on it? It's to have only a couple of points of energy shield on your character, and then to have some sort of mechanic that can burst gain you enough energy shield to take you up to full. If you can do that, then you'll be paid off by receiving this 5% boost to your maximum resistances. This is powerful, and it's definitely something that's significant given that this is kind of a throw-in. You're allocating this because of Shepherd of Souls, but you're getting Everlasting Sacrifice for free, and that is something that's really, really solid. Shepherd of Souls is the reason you're allocating this. This is normally only available on Yarmak's Accord and also in the Settlers expansion on one of the particular runesmithing enchantments. And what this will do is it will cause your non-aura Vaal skills to have significantly less soul cost, but causes the soul cost to increase substantially each time you use one. So Vaal non-aura skills have 80% less soul cost, but Vaal non-aura skills have 100% increased soul cost per Vaal skill that's been used in the past 8 seconds. So remember that one of these is an increase modifier, the other one is a less multiplier. And this means that the first time you use a Vaal skill, let's say that it normally costs you 20 souls. The first time you use it in an 8-second period, it's going to cost you 4 souls. The second time it's going to cost you 8, then 12, then 16, then 20, 24, 28, and so on and so forth. This is potentially extremely strong if you want to just be able to fire off your Vaal skills more reliably than you otherwise can. However, it is worth keeping in mind that this does not have the best interaction with Fever for Corruption. Fever for Corruption has that Vaal skills require 50% reduced souls per use. So to take again that example of a 20 base soul cost gem, then the first time you use it, Fever for Corruption is going to reduce it to 10, then Yarmax Accord is going to reduce it to 2. The second time, it's going to be 6, then it's going to be 10, then it's going to be 14. You can see that Fever for Corruption is still helping you, but it's definitely not stacking in the best possible way with Shepherd of Souls. It's just reducing the cost by 2 each time. But that said, they're both individually good, so you might end up finding yourself a use for them. Really, I think you want to fit one of these into your build. If you're playing with Vaal Lightning Strike, it's absolutely Fever for Corruption, and you can just forget about Forbidden Secrets existing. But if you're playing a different sort of build, then you might find that Forbidden Secrets is the better way to go. Then you could go Forbidden Secrets, Depose Order, Chaos Reigns, especially if you're using a Spellcaster setup. And then you've still got the flexibility. If you want to go with Impure Blood, you've got the option of going with Impure Blood. If you want to go with Dissolution, you can go with Dissolution. Or alternately, Glimpse Chaos is something that's quite strong as a choice there as well. And finally, we have Chaos Reigns. In PathOfExile 1, there are 2 main ways that skills scale with level. Some of them scale only a small amount with level. A couple of examples here. Vaal Lightning Strike, Vaal Grace. These get a little bit better as you level them up, but it's not out of sight better. And then there's all spells that deal damage, and that amount of damage is based upon the gem level. Vaal Fireball, Vaal Lightning Trap, Vaal Cold Snap. All of these skills get out of sight better with +3 gem levels. In fact, gem levels are such a powerful boost to these skills that even if it was +2 to the level of all Vaal skill gems, it would be one of the most powerful things on any Ascendancy. +3 is out of this world better. This is a tremendous amount of extra damage, and so you definitely want to take it if you're building anything that is a Vaal spell specialist, other than those corner case spells that don't really scale in the same way as others. So, Chaos Reigns. This is a raw power node, and it's one of the best raw power nodes around. It's the same sort of power level as Polymath on the Trickster. It's that good. It's just phenomenal. Yeah, take it. There is a lot to build around in the Architect of Chaos. This looks like it's going to be a meta choice if you want to play Lightning Strike one more time before it gets nerfed, but it's also going to be something that can empower a lot of other weird and wonderful things. I think it's in a really good spot, and I think this is definitely a time to end the video, as I often do, by saying, may your Vaal Orbs have interesting results.